On December 26, 1944, Hiroo Onoda, an officer at the Imperial Japanese Army, was deployed to the island of Lubang in the Philippines, then occupied by Japan, with a strict order: conduct guerrilla actions to slow the Allied invasion and, under no circumstances, surrender or take his own life. And that's exactly what he did. He hid in the jungle to fight, with 3 fellow soldiers following him. As we know, Japan was unable to stop the Allied advance, ultimately crushed by the dropping of 2 atomic bombs on its soil. And in August 1945, World War II ended. At least for the rest of the world, because Onoda refused to believe the conflict was over. By then, he was isolated, cut off from official communications, and so indoctrinated that he trusted nothing but his values and the order he had received. Several times over the years, the Japanese government tried to get messages to him to convince him to surrender. First airdropped leaflets, then letters and photographs from families, but nothing each time. He considered that enemy propaganda a trick to make him give up. Years passed, decades even. His companions surrendered or died, but he never abandoned his order. He survived by hunting, stealing food from island residents, and carried on fighting a war that had become only his, while the world forgot him. It took a Japanese adventurer, Norio Suzuki, who still believed in the myth of the soldier hiding for decades in the mountains, to track him down. But even then, Onoda refused to surrender. The government had to send his former commanding officer, Yoshimi Taniguchi, who in the meantime had left the army and had become a bookstore owner, and dispatch him to the Philippines to order Onoda's surrender. It was March 1974. Almost 30 years have passed since the war ended. And that's how one of the last Japanese ghost soldiers surrendered. This incredible event inspired many works from literature to film. Just to name a classic, remember the 2 Japanese soldiers in Disney's movie The Last Flight of Noah's Ark? That was based on this story. It's a truly unbelievable story of a man who shuts himself in and lives inside his own bubble, a bubble of orders, convictions, and a single view of the world, who trusts nothing that happens around him if it seems dissonant with his beliefs. Absurd, right? A reality light years away from us, isn't it? But now tell me, when we browse the web or spend hours in social networks, have we asked ourselves what kind of experience we're actually having? Are we sure we're not inside our own bubble, too? I'm Antonio Ghezzi, and this is the 2nd episode of Spaventevole Technophobia. The internet was created to let us share information and enable interaction. Over time, though, as it opened up to commercial exploitation, it became clear the web had to be redesigned to give us what we were looking for. Because if we found answers to our questions and personal needs, we'd feel good, we'd browse more, and ultimately would consume more. The internet was supposed to become the place to experience value, more or less connected to the physical world around us. It was meant to give us the thrill of discovery in a huge sea of information and possibility, but in the end, it had to guide our choices and make us feel cozy, safe, sort of like home. The algorithm, like a good interior designer, was supposed to furnish this home with ours, selecting the trends of the moment based on our taste, making the space functional, comfortable, and harmonious. Now, that doesn't sound bad in itself. But if we take this tendency to give us what we want, to show us what we like, to introduce us to people like us, and we push it to the extreme, what do we get? We get the feeling that online, everyone thinks like we do. Scrolling through posts, videos, and comments, the world seems strangely aligned with our ideas. And that's no accident, because today we live in a digital ecosystem that knows us better than we know ourselves. It feeds us on our own opinions, gives them back to us, amplifies them, and serves them up again until we convince ourselves that this is reality. In this scenario, paradoxically, what should scare us isn't conflict, but its absence. It's the quiet that wraps around us and becomes an unsettling quiet. The mechanisms behind this outcome are many, intertwined, and constantly evolving, because technology never stops. Let's start to unpack them. Digital platforms in the broad sense, from search engines to browsers to social networks, are based on algorithms. Set of rules and operations executed in sequence to solve a problem or complete a task. To work well, algorithms need certain traits. They're finite, they end after a finite number of steps. They're defined and unambiguous. Instructions must be clear and unequivocal. They're deterministic, the same input produces the same output. And they're generalizable, applicable to an entire class of similar problems. Since on the web the problem is to satisfy whoever's browsing, helping them find what they're looking for, algorithms have been refined to personalize the user experience based on past behaviors, search history, likes, watch time, and clicks. The result? A tailor-made internet for each of us that, however, tends to cut out everything different, unexpected, or uncomfortable. This phenomenon was introduced and illustrated by Eli Pariser in his 2011 book titled The Filter Bubble. He defines filter bubbles as that personal ecosystem of information that has been created by algorithms. First, algorithms figure out who you are and what you like by observing your behavior. Then, starting from the premise that if you like one thing, you'll like another similar thing, they recommend content and services aligned with your preferences, things that guarantee a fit. Then they proceed with fine-tuning until what's proposed fits perfectly. In the end, you find yourself in your bubble, surrounded by things you're interested in, that you like, that make you feel safe and at home. But that also create an ideological frame, which can lead to intellectual isolation, because heterogeneous things are filtered upstream and hidden before they even reach you. In effect, you end up preaching to the choir, and you are the choir. And the intriguing yet scary thing is that this is an algorithmic, invisible mechanism. You don't necessarily choose to lock yourself in a bubble. You just end up there. It's a kind of confirmation bias automatically fueled by the machine, pushing you to seek and remember only the information that confirms what you already believed, ignoring or downplaying the rest. And that's the first part of the problem. The second part happens when everyone in a similar filter bubble who think alike tend to cluster in groups, forums, and communities, social structures that function like echo chambers. Since in an empty space sound reverberates, the echo chamber is a metaphor for a situation where your beliefs are amplified or reinforced through communication and repetition within a closed system, insulated from the possibility of a reply. Only consonant ideas circulate, while dissonant or off-key voices are actively isolated, criticized and excluded. It's a social reinforcement driven by homophily, the tendency to form relationships with people considered similar, which leads a group to develop a tunnel vision and bask in its own information cocoon, where everything confirms what you already think. So not only you're singing to yourself, but you're always dealing with people who think exactly like you. This lack of exposure to what's different to the other can end up homogenizing, polarizing, and radicalizing your ideas, and consequently leading to culture wars and social fragmentation. Some call all of this the splinternet, an internet exploding into a bunch of crazy shards, or cyber balkanization, evoking what happened in the Balkans after the dissolution of Yugoslavia, instability, disintegration, and conflict. Or even neo-tribalism, where self-segregated groups are created with strong social bonds and similar behaviors. So filter bubbles and echo chambers interact and reinforce each other, riding confirmation bias either automatic or socially fueled. The difference between the two is subtle but crucial. In the filter bubble, it's the algorithm that isolates you almost without you realizing it. In the echo chamber, it's you who isolates yourself, deliberately choosing who to be with. Now, this issue of choice and responsibility isn't free from criticism. Several studies argue that you don't end up in a bubble by chance because you choose what to click and what not to, who to listen to and who to talk to. But the phenomenon undoubtedly represents a drift towards what I'd call a kind of comforting hyper-personalization offered by the web. Still, while we vacillate between the user's passive or active role, while we wonder how much is our fault versus the system's, the outcome is the same. We lose contact with complexity. Up to now, we've still been considering a human internet where content is created by people. But as we learned in the first episode, the internet is dead, and the content on the web is increasingly synthetic and artificial. And this is where generative AI enters and everything accelerates. With the arrival of models like GPT, Midjourney, or Sora, creating thousands of credible text, images, or videos has become incredibly easily and ultra low cost. People talk about AI slop, synthetic, low quality content, mass produced, often without human oversight. So generative AI amplifies filter bubbles and strengthens echo chambers because it generates personalized content efficiently and in a sophisticated way. And this content systematically mirrors and reiterates the convictions shared by a group. The logic is clear. If the bubble shows you the same themes over and over, and the echo chamber surrounds you with people who say the same things over and over, AI now provides unlimited fuel to keep it all running. Homogeneity becomes a systemic mechanism. Some recent studies even start talking not just about echo chambers, but echo platforms, where entire platforms become ideologically homogeneous spaces, and users migrate from one platform to another to find environments more aligned with their preferences, sometimes jumping onto extremist platforms, the so-called alt-tech. But there's also a counterintuitive effect that starts to show up. With the obsessive use of LLMs, large language models, polarization seems to decrease. It's not yet certain whether this is true or why. Perhaps now that many texts are produced by AI or by an AI-human hybrid, everything skews a little towards the center, because LLMs tend to normalize to aim for consensus rather than conflict. With an internet that's increasingly artificial and dead, it'll be interesting to see where we're headed. Good. If we set out to understand a few foundational mechanisms behind how the internet works, we now have a recipe mixing bubbles, echoes and echo platforms, and generative AI. Let's add one last ingredient. Artificially generated content can be fake. Bogus, but increasingly realistic. And it's not just text, but also video, audio, and images. Think of deepfake technology reproducing faces and voices, making anyone say anything. And this content can be spread by actors with malicious intent. Try tossing a lie into a bubble nested inside a closed echo chamber and see what happens. The lie reverberates, it spreads. And the domino effect of a lie sown in an echo chamber is incredibly hard to stop. If we convince ourselves a fork is called a dinglehopper because we trusted the wrong seagull, we'll start using it as a comb. Okay, whoever catches that lofty reference, write it in the comments and you'll earn 10 cool points and a free subscription to the channel, which by the way is already free. But that example, which I jammed in here for me, really, to celebrate a childhood memory, is trivial. The point is the mechanism is the same for ideas that are much more dangerous and far harder to uproot. When technology makes it possible to falsify reality in a plausible way, we can no longer recognize lies from truth. Then we are at the mercy of the liar's dividend, the liars and fraudsters who pull something big and then, when accused, can simply say, "Oh, that's not true, I didn't do it, it's fake." And we get smothered by AI gaslighting, AI that creates fake content that confuses you, makes you no longer know what to believe, and leads you to doubt even your own memory and perception of reality. Awesome, now we've added all the main ingredients, shaken them up, and cooked our messy stew. So what should we do to make it less indigestible and to keep from being afraid to taste anything we run into online? Well, as always, there are no magic formulas, but there are a few heuristics, simple rules. Let's start with the fact that once again, the platforms themselves, the ones that cause the problem, come to our aid in an effort to keep their ecosystem from collapsing. Policies are being introduced that penalize content automatically generated in bulk and that force creators to disclose what's been created or altered via AI. And in general, there's a growing attention not only to debunking strategies which unmask falsehood after they have been circulating, but also prebunking, actions that warn people in advance about common manipulation tactics. And then there's us. We often feel at the mercy of apps, platforms, and algorithms, and sometimes we hide behind the situation using the excuse, if the whole world works like this, what can I do? But let's be honest. Putting it like that is an easy shortcut because it lets us remain passive and make no effort. Sure, we can accept that you want to stay in your comfort zone, kick back on a virtual couch and listen only to what you want with people telling you you're right. It's your bubble and you hear the echo, only the echo is made of different voices saying the same thing. But you need to be aware that you are choosing to relax and self-indulge. You need to be aware that you're chasing hedonic pleasure, not striving for truth. You need to be aware that you're not learning anything, that you're not becoming a better version of yourself. Between tension and stagnation, you've chosen stagnation. The problem is that filter bubbles plus echo chambers plus lies become your personal black hole. A black hole pulls you in. It drags you toward itself in proportion to its mass, which creates a powerful gravitational field. And you feed its mass by increasing the time you spend watching things you already know, already like, and have already heard. The black hole warps space-time. It changes your reality, and you convince yourself that this is the real world. And if you cross the event horizon, which by the way is an insanely cool name, event horizon, if you cross the threshold beyond which no event inside the black hole can affect an outside observer, you can't escape anymore. Light, the truth in its multifaceted beauty, no longer reaches you. Do you already feel like you've fallen into your own personal socio-digital black hole? Or do you still have a little bit of will and strength left to try to climb out? Do you want to find the right balance between the effort to learn, to open up, to grow, and an intellectual and emotional relaxation cradled by comfortable opinion? It's up to you. If you want to try, you've got several paths. If you want to start from the top, when assessing the reliability of what you're shown, begin by leaning on the principle of authority, established and verified sources of information. In the end, that's what our good old Onoda did, right? The only one who convinced him to surrender was his former officer, so authority. Otherwise, if you want to start from the bottom and work your way up, leveraging your social capital, the network of relationships you share a purpose with, interact with it in informal context, online but also offline. Find a common touch point, a passion, a hobby, a game. That's your anchor, the thing that keeps you from feeling lost or adrift. Get your bearings. Then try to branch out. Those people will share your initial passion, but they'll have lots of different opinions on various topics. Explore, and maybe, if you appreciate them in some areas, you learn to appreciate how they see the world differently from you. And you might realize that many of your certainties, which feel like certainties because they're reinforced by bubbles and echoes, are just opinions. And maybe if algorithms have brought lies into your chambers, they're even false. Remember, a deliberate effort to cultivate critical and speculative thinking leads you to evaluate the information you receive and to accept dissent as a sign of collective intelligence, not hostility. That's what bursts the bubble and dissipates the echo. Let's wrap up with our Screwedometer, which measures how scary the scenario is and how screwed would be if it played out in its worst consequences. The scare score for the combo of bubbles, echo chambers, and artificial fake news is 4 out of 10. The bubble isolates you. The echo reinforces your ideas, and the lies distort your reality. But the bubble isn't indestructible. You can break it by changing your behavior if you decide to. Subscribe to the Spaventevole Technophobia channels and tell me what you think of the score and the opposite. Unless your black hole has already sucked you in.